Greetings fanboys and fangirls, Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever. Today I'm coming to you with the second part of my Operation Monster Force reviews. So what we have here today are the figures number 3 and 4. Here we have the Forgotten King, the leader of the villain faction, and believe it or not, Dracula, one of the leaders of the good guy faction. So what even is Operation Monster Force? Well, it is a Big Bad Toy Store exclusive line that is financed and produced by Big Bad Workshop, their creative wing, and it is handled by the company Fresh Monkey Fiction, who is responsible for Eagle Force and a whole bunch of other 3 3/4 scale figures. This is their big push into the 6-inch space and is a line that pretty much combines the feel and overall super military aesthetics of G.I. Joe Classified along with the more horror influenced elements. If you haven't watched it yet, be sure to check out the first part of this 3-part series that highlighted those first 3 figures. And with all that out of the way, let's begin. Here's a quick look at the figures in the boxes. Keep in mind that on the inside flaps of these figures, they have some really nice one-page comics that they've created that helps explain and flesh out the stories of each individual character. The Forgotten King here is the villain of the piece, and he is kind of a supernatural Egyptian deity. And then of course we have Count Dracula, who hardly needs an introduction, but is freed from his long imprisonment by the Van Helsing family in order to help raise a vampire army to stop the mindless zombie hordes of the Forgotten King. Alright, so let's begin by talking about the figures aesthetically and why I chose to review these two together. Not only are they within sequence numerically of each other, but they also have several different visual kind of motifs that are very similar with some reused artistry among them. For one thing, you can see that their two kind of overcoats here are both very similar. As a matter of fact, I kind of wonder if some elements of them are reused. The same can be said of their legs and their boots. As you can see, it is just the regular pants sculpt along with the large knee-high boots. Beyond that though, we do have differing hands, as the Forgotten King's hands have wraps all over them, and we have bare hands over there for Dracula, and of course completely different head sculpts and accessories. Alright, let's go ahead and focus on each character individually. We're going to start with the one that I think most people are already fairly familiar with, figure number 4 in sequence, and that is Count Dracula. Of course, since this line was announced from the word go, it's always been something that really appealed to me, specifically Dracula himself, and he was actually the first figure I pre-ordered once they revealed them. Of course, if you've seen any of my other horror kind of tinged reviews, then you know I'm a sucker for any kind of classic horror character that's being reinterpreted in that 6-inch scale, much like my recent 4 Horsemen Figura Obscura Frankenstein video shown. Dracula here is no exception. Of course, I'm always fascinated by new interpretations of this classic Bram Stoker character, but here there's certainly quite a bit to discuss in terms of what we see with the sculpting choices that they've made. For one thing, we will look at the head here. Basically, this head sculpt is the alternate one, meaning that it is a good bit more ferocious than the standard, more relaxed expression. I really do appreciate how the teeth are individually painted there, and that the paint masking is exceptionally well done. I think that is fantastic. I also really like this kind of pale shade of green that they have here. It's really nice and kind of minty in a way. Beyond that, Dracula does have the long hair, as he has been kind of out of commission for a while, and a beard. I think all of it really comes together to make something nice, and I love the expressiveness of the kind of red pupils in the eyes. Beyond that, Dracula's costume consists of an old-fashioned tie, and we also have an overcoat with a waist jacket or vest right there. And I really like the pattern that they have painted in on that vest. It does look legitimate. We can also see that there are quite a number of buttons on the front of the chest, which help give him sort of a paramilitary look in the abdomen section. I think that the introduction of red here on the lapels was awfully important to get that extra splash of color. And as you can see, the back of the coat is well sculpted too. Much like the other figures, Dracula does come with his own personalized base stand. And he also has this really nice sword, which I really didn't expect to care at all about. Features bat wings and several vampire kind of motifs, and I think that it's just awesome looking. However, not something comfortably be able to store. Dracula comes with far less accessories than the other figures we looked at in our first part of this review. With Declan Van Helsing and the Delta Reds, they came with just an absolute litany of stuff. Instead, Dracula here does include 4 alternative hands for both left and right for a total of 8. And that includes fisted hands, grabbing hands, and open hands and trigger fingers. However, other than that, he comes with his sword that we just discussed, and he comes with an alternative relaxed facial expression head. Before I move on, I do need to show you what it looks like without the other head on, and it's kind of a mess under there. You can see where the paint, whether that happened during production or while I've had it, is starting to come off of that neck, and it might be even worse on the back, but thankfully it's hidden by the collar. The thing is that a lot of people, when they pop off these heads, the entire neck apparatus is coming with it, which is kind of aggravating. So you do have to reattach the neck and kind of take the head itself off with your own fingers. Here is the good Count's alternative standard. Here is Count Dracula's more kind of relaxed facial expression head. I imagine this is the one that a whole lot of people will probably end up displaying. The one issue, like I said visually, is once you put the head up at all, you can start to see some of those kind of stray paint marks there on the neck. Other than that, I do think they've done a really good job at capturing that kind of classic Dracula look, while not kind of veering too far off into Lugosi land or the land of Nosferatu. Instead, it just looks like a really dignified kind of classic Dracula who happens to have long hair and a beard. So I think that it goes away in making him look a little more noble and a little more believable as possibly someone who is aiding the heroes. I do find it interesting that Dracula does not include a scabbard for his sword, nor does he include any kind of firearms, yet he does have the trigger finger hands. Alright, so we should definitely look at the articulation on this guy. This will also be our look for the Forgotten King. Since these two characters share the vast majority of their parts, it should be the same for both. Starting off with the head, we have a hinge, while we also have kind of a freely rotating neck as well. So you can get all sorts of different things. The head is on there really tight at the top, so that may be something that you want to heat up and kind of just flex a little bit. You can also see that here at the shoulder, you can bring it all the way around. There is a swivel at the shoulder. There is a double jointed elbow. There is a rotation at the hand, and the wingspan is able to go well over 90 degrees. At the waist, you do have a lot of articulation, but a lot of it is hidden under this waistcoat here. Mine has come unglued here as I have tried to pose him around, but rather than gluing it back, I've kind of kept it that way to give myself more options. Moving down to the bottom half of the figure, you can see that we do have those nice drop-down hips like we did with the previous figures we looked at, which are really impressive for a smaller company. And you can see that we have a thigh swivel, we have a double-jointed knee that works pretty well, and we have a boot swivel, and we have really good hinges at the boots, which can go every which way, and also an excellent ankle rocker pivot. So you can get those really wide poses, and Dracula can put that voodoo on you. Look at that, all without the aid of his stand. Of course, speaking of the stand, it does say Count Dracula on it, and like the other stands, can be used as a headstone in the backdrop, even though it says Monster Force on it, and it has the kind of little pegs there. It's still really cool. You could always turn it around like this, I guess, if you wanted to. It looks a little weirder that way, but still, I think it's cool. Of course, Dracula here sizes really well with the rest of the line, of course. We're going to put him with his unlikely partner, Declan Van Helsing, and Declan is not in that wide stance. But when Dracula is standing straight up along with Declan, he's about the same height. I do think that for whatever reason, Dracula has turned out slightly shorter. He does seem a little bit smaller in frame, and maybe ever so slightly smaller in stature. I don't know, I kind of like that though, because this may be a cop-out to say this, but in Dracula's day, people were shorter. So I do think if Dracula was being kept somewhere or something and then he came back, yeah, he would probably be a little bit more on that shorter side, but it works. I think sometimes as action figure collectors, we get really hung up on this idea that everybody in the world in a figure line is like 6 foot tall and everybody's exactly the same height. That is not how the real world works. Of course, it's also important to see him alongside his vampire troops. Whoa. And he's hunched down just a little bit to keep him more in line with Dracula. But much like Declan, he uses about the same parts, and he's just slightly taller. So Dracula definitely doesn't have quite the stature of some of the other guys. Of course, we'll put Dracula with his unlikely new best friend, Shipwreck, from G.I. Joe Classified, because why not, you know? If you don't realize it, I kind of went over this in part 1. This line is definitely meant to be G.I. Joe Classified adjacent, and it is meant to be the exact same scale. And funny enough, Shipwreck scales maybe even better with Dracula than the other figures in this line. So you've been waiting for that G.I. Joe Dracula. Here he is. And maybe in your own headcanon, Dracula has turned back to his wicked ways. So in that case, here he is with Cobra Commander as they both plot to conquer the Earth. Brand new BFFs. One fun thing that you can do with Dracula that I hadn't mentioned before, and especially if your glue comes off over here like this, you can take the back coat, and you can do this with the Forgotten King as well, and all of a sudden you have something a lot more dynamic for taking photos. So it kind of just looks like the wind is sweeping it back. If you don't do that, it ends up kind of having a more static look that doesn't always look the best in photos. So it's just something you can keep in mind to try. Overall, I am very impressed with this Dracula, and I think that he is a great figure that just lacks some of the accessories that made Declan, but especially the Delta Red, so impressive. I think that with this, you're more buying it for the character and the alternate head, and it's a shame he didn't include any kind of alternate pieces or armor, but I know that he's supposed to look a little less combat ready and more dignified. I guess Dracula is relying more on dark arts rather than armor. Next up, we have indeed remembered the Forgotten King. So let's start off with this really interesting head sculpt. I really like this. It definitely has this kind of, Egyptian death mask look to it, something you would have seen on the head of a sarcophagus perhaps, something like that. And it looks really cool. I like the pops of blue right there over the eyes, and I love all of the kind of Anubis kind of look to it. It's really nice. On the back, there is a little necklace that's kind of draped back there, and I like this black wash over it so that you can see all these little like hieroglyphic almost kind of details right there. So I think all of that is really good, and they definitely didn't have to go as hard as they did on it, but they did, so I appreciate it. You can see that his neck is actually okay. There's not a bunch of paint problems under it, so I think that that is good at least, because the other ones definitely did have some paint issues, especially Dracula on the neck. The neck is just bare, so it's just bare skin right there, and I think it works pretty well. With the hand here, this is one of the cool alternate accessories it comes with, is you have this kind of completely removable piece that's like an effect that's meant to go over his wrist. I'm sure you can also put it at different spots around his staff that we'll get into, but it's just like, Jack Kirby kind of looking effect piece, and he also has this cool translucent blue hand. So it's going to be great for photography as he uses his dark magic, so I think that's going to work really well. I really appreciate that all the buttons are painted gold. If it wasn't for that, this would probably look even more basic than it does, because one of my only gripes about him visually is that there's just so much white here. I almost feel like there should have been, maybe the vest could have been just slightly gray, or maybe the tie could have been something. With everything cast in that exact same white, you start to lose some of that detail. So yeah, that's my one little gripe with the visual. I think everything else looks great. He does have a gold belt buckle, so that's something, but it's kind of hard to see. None of this vest is removable or anything. I'm sure that you could probably pop the arms out if you heated it up and slide this off, but I'm not sure that that would necessarily look right, because you would have these arms that probably don't go with the shirt underneath, but it might look decent. You never know. But I'm sure it's just, yeah, you can see the bottom of the tie right there. So it's just kind of a dress shirt under it. Down here you do have the pants, and they have a little bit more of a texture than I thought they did when cast in this white. Definitely more canvasy looking, and then the exact same Dracula boots that we saw before. On the back, there's really nothing to write home about. It's exactly like Dracula's trench coat as well. Now, some of the best detail on the entire figure actually comes in the form of the staff. And you can see the awesome paint detail that they've included on the skull that's on it here. And I just think this is so impressive. I especially like the cobra hoods that are going around the two skulls on the sides and with the blood detail on the back of the skull. There's more ornamentation there and a little scarab. Going on down, you can see where the staff is wrapped, and there's even this blade at the bottom. Speaking of that, he also comes with another one of these blades, because you can pop this off at the top and you can replace it. And as you can see, it looks really good, just double bladed, but there's no way I'm going to display this without also having the head ornament on there. So I think this is nice though, especially for combat poses as he's using it like a blade. I think that would look really nice in photography. Originally I thought that these were like mummy wraps on the hands, but really it's just the folds and the gloves that when painted white just reminds me of that. So I think it might be the exact same gloves from the Delta Reds, but they look nice. Not only does the Forgotten King come with all those other alternate hand options, he also has bare hands as well. So there are tons of hand options. There are 4 hands for each side, and they come in white and flesh tone, and of course the translucent blue to match the effects. So there's really no shortage of alternative hands for him. It's really nice to have all those extra options, because you never know. And you can definitely get some cool alternative looks like this, and you can, combine those hands and accessories to kind of do what you want. As a little preview for what's coming up next in the final part of the Series 1 basic review, I will show you him alongside of the Sleepwalkers, which are his faction of zombies. Before I forget, here's the Forgotten King stand, and it works just like the others. All right, and here the Forgotten King is alongside of his Sleepwalkers, which are his faction of kind of zombies that happen to look like a certain military group from a long time ago. But we will get into these guys in the final part of our Series 1 review, because there's a lot to talk about there, but they look good together. And that'll do it for my review of these 2 supernatural titans, one representing the Egyptian world and the other representing Count Dracula himself. I really do think that these are fun figures, and I especially like that they were able to get a lot of mileage out of those reused parts and get creative with that. Dracula does feel that he is lacking somewhat in terms of accessories. I would have loved to have seen him come with at least some kind of maybe blood spatter effect or something like that. Just something that would have made up for him not having all the numerous armor pieces and helmets and masks and things that the other figures have. But I also understand that he's a very different type of character. The Forgotten King is also really fun. I feel like the Forgotten King does kind of stray slightly from the overall aesthetic of the line. It's good to have a lot of variety, of course, and a lot of this is just down to personal preference, but for me, I'm not the biggest fan of mummies and all the Egyptian kind of side of horror, but he certainly does kind of deviate from what the rest of the line looks like, because everybody else kind of falls in line with that paramilitary look, aside from Dracula, who's of course a remnant of the old world. But I suppose it makes sense, because the Forgotten King is as well. In a way, these 2 guys do feel like they're sort of removed from the line, which is very much kind of a supernatural G.I. Joe type of thing. And I think that's good in a way, though, because it allows these guys to stand out and give the line some variety. It also gives them some expanded tooling to choose from in releases that I think actually put it to better use that are coming out in the future. We don't know how long it'll be, but if these are anything to go by, it might be a while. But still, I do really enjoy these guys, and I definitely think it would be a shame if you only got the army builders and didn't get their supernatural commanders as well. I think that these guys look really good, and you'll be really happy with them in your collection. Just in terms of price, they were $36.99 at Big Bad Toy Store, which I think was kind of a tough pill to swallow, since NECA pretty much has that price point and theirs are 7-inch. But at the same time, these guys are done as an independent kind of upstart action figure company thing and are not one of the larger companies. That in mind, I do wish they'd had more accessories like their brethren in the line that helps justify their cost. All right, friends, thank you so much for watching. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, be sure to subscribe, because that really does help us out. Also, be sure to like the video, because that always helps. And as always, God bless you and yours. And I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.